So welcome to the webinar, Engaging Communities on Sustainability. My name is Corinne Buckley. I am a planner in the Environment and Development Department of the North Central Texas Council of Governments, or NCTCOG, and I'm going to be moderating today's webinar. So a couple of housekeeping items I'll go over first. Please remember to keep your microphone on mute until it's time to share a question or a comment. Following all presentations, there will be some dedicated time for Q&A, so I will share instructions on how to submit questions once we get to that point in the webinar. A follow-up email containing a recording of this webinar and the presentation slides will be sent to all those who registered. So if you did not register and would like to receive those follow-up emails, you can email me to let me know, and I can drop my email in the chat. Additionally, the slides and the recording will be posted to the Conserve North Texas website following the conclusion of the webinar. And then finally, if your time attending today's webinar is not paid for through federal dollars, we do invite you to complete the in-kind match form to donate the value of your time. So our contract with the State Energy Conservation Office that allows us to put on these webinars requires a match. So using the value of your time by attending this webinar helps us to reach our goal. And further details about that are in the form. You can either click that link on the slide, or I will also put it in the chat. So this workshop is sponsored by the State Energy Conservation Office, or SECO. SECO provides support for NCTCOG to tackle energy efficiency projects and needs throughout the region. Through this work, we coordinate workshops, webinars, and technical assistance on a variety of energy management, energy efficiency, water efficiency, and renewable energy topics. If you're not familiar with NCTCOG, it is a voluntary association of local governments. We are one of 24 regional councils in Texas, and the Regional Energy Management Program supports local governments in identifying energy management needs, provides greater awareness of local energy reporting requirements, and shares resources to support local and regional goals. So today's webinar is scheduled to last until 2:30. We'll be hearing 3 presentations, and then after all those presentations, like I said, there'll be some dedicated time for questions, and then I'll also be sharing some information on upcoming events and available resources. Today we'll first hear from Dr. John Nielsen-Gammon, Regent Professor of Atmospheric Sciences at Texas A&M University, Texas State Climatologist, and Director of the Southern Regional Climate Center, who will be sharing Speaking of Climate Change. We'll then hear from Sarah Coles, Executive Director of the Texas Children in Nature Network, who will present Nature Smart Libraries, a community hub for nature. And then finally, we'll hear from Dr. Stephanie Clintonia Boddie, who will share Building Resilience from the Ground Up, lesson from Waco's S.C.R.A.P Collective. So we will get into the presentations, and I would like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. John Nielsen-Gammon. John Nielsen-Gammon is a Regents Professor of Atmospheric Science at Texas A&M University. He received his PhD from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in 1990 and joined the faculty at Texas A&M 1 year later. His research focuses on droughts, floods, and other types of high-impact weather events. And you should be able to take control in picking your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. And thanks for the opportunity to talk to you. The title of my talk is Speaking About Climate Change, and I'm going to be talking about speaking of climate change. The challenge with climate change as a topic is that it's a heavily politicized topic, primarily from what we call a mitigation perspective, the idea of reducing carbon dioxide emissions, which brings in all sorts of tricky issues, social, political, monetary, etc. But generally speaking, I get to focus on, as state climatologist, adaptation, dealing with the fact that climate change has happened and that it's occurring, and no matter what the cause, we still have to be resilient to whatever the climate's going to throw at us, whether or not we're causing that climate change. And so that makes things a bit less political. And for most of what you'll be doing in terms of sustainability, it's sort of the same sort of thing. You're doing things that are directed towards making sure that communities can thrive going forward no matter what the climate's doing, and which means actually knowing something about what the climate is doing. There's perception that Texans in particular are very skeptical about man-made climate change. And if you look at sort of the four aspects of climate change, first off, is the global temperature warming? Is man the cause of that? The scientists agree on man-made climate change, and should we regulate carbon dioxide? This is results of national polling, and you can see fairly even divisions. The numbers are somewhere around 40 to 70%, no matter what the question is. But Texas doesn't stand out as especially at one end of the spectrum or the other, unlike, let's say, California, which stands out at one end of the spectrum, or frankly, Louisiana or Oklahoma stand out at the other end. So we've got of course, Texas being a big state, that masks quite a bit of diversity of opinion within the state and within different groups and different locations within the state. So it's very challenging to deal with that. And basically, it's not possible to have a one-size-fits-all approach, other than making sure that whatever you're doing, you're talking to people where they are with the perceptions that go along with their own worldviews. Now, climate change has had a rocky history within the Texas legislature. There was a bill in 2007, before it became terribly politicized, that called on essentially El Paso convening a workshop on climate change, which was great. I attended that. After that, it was pretty quiet, although we started having more and more extreme weather events that kept getting people's attention. So, for example, after the 2021 cold freeze, there was state law that said that ERCOT, the PUC, and the Railroad Commission should consult with the state climatologist in rulemaking for resilience. 2023, the Sunset Commission for the Texas Water Development Board said to consult with the state climatologist, and I've been working closely with them since that time. And in 2025, a bill would have required several agencies to publish what they call severe weather adaptation plans. The word climate not there, although I'm mentioned as a possible person to work with. And that actually made it through the House, but didn't get a hearing in the Senate. So climate is becoming more and more of an issue that even politicians at the state level are recognizing we have to deal with, even we can't necessarily talk about it openly. Now, climate is much more than climate change, and as a state climatologist, I deal with climate services, which includes lots of things. It includes understanding what the current state of the climate is, placing current climate events into historic context, particularly exceptional events, helping to interpret seasonal outlooks, looking at things coming in the next month, next few months, and so forth, important for agriculture, important for water supplies, and also explaining climate projections. So that all falls under climate services and falls under my responsibility as a state climatologist. And so that means, generally speaking, when I'm talking to some group, I'm not talking specifically about climate change. I'm not avoiding talking about climate change, but because it's not going to be the focus of what I'm talking about, it doesn't become so much of a polarizing topic. And that's part of my strategy, trying to minimize the polarization when it's not conducive to dealing with the issue at hand. Sorry. Like I say, speak to your audience. Understand some terms are going to be okay in some circumstances and not others. But everybody sort of knows what we're talking about. By proceed chronologically, I basically mean talking about a formula I try to use: past climate, then present climate, then future climate. Because people can't really argue about what's happened in the past for the most part. We have data, we have records. Present time, people are living with it. And the future, we can't predict with certainty. And recognizing all three of those, none of those are particularly controversial statements. So as you get to the future where climate change starts becoming more and more relevant and the conversation can become more and more political, you've already established this foundation of grounding yourself in the facts and things that have actually happened and experiences that people actually have. So in that sense, you earn people's trust, partly by talking about things that they can agree about, and also partly by um, focusing on the things that matter to them in the context of whatever your mission is in speaking to them. So what I want to do is show you one more slide and then give you excerpts from slides from three different presentations I've given over the past few years to talk about how I contextualize and present the information tailored to a particular audience. I really can't generalize, but maybe in the specifics, you'll be able to take some insights that you can use in your own practices. Okay, two more slides, sorry. So for example, things to remember about your audience. Skeptics are not evil. You might be one yourself. Catastrophists, people who believe that climate change is going to wreck the world, they're not evil either, and perhaps you're one yourself. You're probably not both of them simultaneously, however. That sort of polarization is kind of hard to survive. But neither of them are caused by what we call knowledge deficits. In other words, a skeptic isn't someone who's a skeptic because they haven't seen the truth about climate change. And a catastrophist is not a catastrophist because they haven't seen the truth about climate change. The truth in general lies somewhere in between those two poles. You can probably generalize that. That's generally the case. But that also means you can't really convince somebody just from a talk, just from a simple listing of facts, because they've already got a set of facts that strongly supports their point of view. And while it's not a comprehensive and balanced set of facts, it's still information that they've dealt with and have ingrained into their thinking. So you can't confront that. You have to sort of sidestep it and deal with only the component of the issue that's important for what you're dealing with. Now, I talk a lot to people in government, federal, state, local, and so forth, and I've developed a completely subjective matrix representing the politicization of climate change. So, in my perspective, climate change gets more and more political the higher up you go in terms of local versus federal, in terms of the leaders, so that at the presidential level, you've got all sorts of policies that are either advancing climate change initiatives or rolling them back. But if you get down into political appointees at federal agencies, that's a little bit less politicized. And then the people who are actually on the ground doing the work. They're experts and they understand climate change. They understand the science behind it, and they're trying to do things non-politically. At the state level, you've got the same sort of progression. But the thing is, as you get down from state to local, the people doing the work at the local level are generally speaking not as expert in something like the science of climate change as someone who's at the federal level working for NOAA or NASA, EPA, what have you. And so because understanding climate change is not critical to someone's job at the local level in general, at the worker level, you basically have the same sort of politicization you see in the general population. Whereas leaders and managers at the local level and the regional level are aware enough about climate change issues that at least they know there's some reality perhaps to both sides of those extreme positions. And they have to deal with the problems with the best knowledge that's available. So, one example of a talk which I gave to an industry association, Texas Aggregates and Concrete, was on something called NOAA Atlas 14, which many of you may also deal with. That's the document that the federal government produces that determines the magnitudes of what we call 100-year rainfall events. And that gets used to plug into simulations to determine floodplains and so forth. And Texas, a few years back, got an updated analysis. There's an even more updated analysis that's going to be coming out, or scheduled to come out later this year, that will actually take into account trends. And we're working on one that will take into account trends in extreme weather for the state of Texas, specifically. But this is how I presented things. So first off, this map showed the change in the magnitude of the 1-day 100-year rainfall amount between the update and the previous version. The shading is places where the estimated 100-year return value rainfall amount increased with the update. Yellow is where it decreased. And there's a lot more greens than yellows here, which means the numbers in general went up. And that's climate change. Climate change tends to have a broad impact overall. And I'll show you analysis we did that looked at trends in extreme rainfall across a much broader area. But the blue lines on this plot are the contours from the old version, which you can see are very smooth. And they don't include details such as the Balcones escarpment, the enhancement of rainfall in Flash Flood Alley, which we unfortunately saw an example of earlier this month. So the green swath across South Central Texas is just greater detail. And similarly, the green swath in Southeast Texas is mostly Hurricane Harvey, Tropical Storm Allison, and so forth, places that have gotten unlucky with respect to extreme recent rainfall events. But climate change is not that specific. And when you look at data that's much more well specified, not depending on one or two extreme events, you see much more even trends in climate change. So these are temperature trends in the state of Texas, and all of the trends are within a factor of 2 of each other and going up everywhere. Rainfall trends going up in central and eastern Texas, down in western Texas, and you can measure those trends pretty accurately with just 1 or 2 rain gauges. But when you start talking about extreme rainfall trends, you get a very noisy picture from individual station records, because you really have to pull back and look at things on a broad scale to figure out what part of the trend you've seen is actually climate change. And so we did this study on trends across the South and Southeast United States, and found if you smooth things over and aggregate things, you can start to see what the long-term large-scale trend is that might be attributable to climate change. So it's important not just to rely on what's been observed and what the trend is, but also, is it physically plausible that this would be caused by climate change? And also, is this something that climate models predict should happen? And we've observed heavier rainfall, and that makes sense physically because a warmer atmosphere can hold more water vapor, as I would explain. It can also affect weather patterns, and that can influence extreme rainfall as well. So going into the basics of why, just from as simply as possible, makes it clear to your audience that there's something going on that actually is understandable and makes sense. And that's very useful in grounding things. Okay, second example of a talk. This is given to the Central Texas Sheep and Goat Expo near San Angelo, Texas. And I considered that audience to be a relatively conservative audience. Farmers tend to be such. So I grounded my talk to a large extent on past weather. They had gone through a remarkably wet period recently when I'd given this talk, and So I showed the monthly rainfall totals for that region to show drought, wet period, and that those sorts of variations are normal. But even in that context, the recent wetness they had experienced was somewhat abnormal and should be regarded as that. And indeed, if I plotted the wettest months of the year, the wettest months that ever occurred, the recent years, 2015 and 2018, are three of the top 10, but another four of the top 10 in purple all occurred in the 1930s. So um, by showing that, I'm making an overt point and a covert point. The overt point is this exceptional rainfall in 2018 is not a one-off event. We know it can happen again because it's happened before in the past. But I'm also saying, by showing this sort of thing, I'm looking at historical data and I'm looking at everything that happens in historical context. And I'm not trying to make the point that what's happening recently is unprecedented and is part of a whole set of climate change things, because that's not as relevant to the audience as what should we expect to happen next month, or how unlikely is this particular thing to happen. Then I cut to the seasonal forecast, and explain what those are, looking at short term because that's what the agricultural audience is going to be interested in. I went into explanations of why that's happening. This is actually looking below the surface of the Pacific Ocean. I'm not going to go explain it now. I talk about what's happened recently in terms of rainfall patterns in the region, and talk about the general outlook in terms of the long-term forecast for um, El Nino and for precipitation. And finally, for really long-term stuff, then I start showing the trend plots, trends in precipitation and trends in temperature, things I led with in the other presentation. So that's related to the different audience and the different needs of the different audience. The industry associations was concerned with long-term climate change. Generally speaking, farmers and ranchers are more concerned about what's going to happen next month or next year, and being able to consider what might happen 10 years down the road is a sort of a luxury item. So I prioritize my information based upon their priorities. Last presentation I want to highlight is one that I gave to the first Waco Sustainability Symposium. So here it's a non-technical audience, but still interested in sustainability, so probably a set of climate change believers. And since I was addressing, but there could be some people there that were entirely skeptics and wanted to have their worst fears about catastrophes concerned. So I wanted to make the point here that I've made to you, that different people have different perceptions and reality does lie somewhere in between. So examples of hype statements, trends in flooding, deadlines for saving the planet. Neither of those are true, which I could talk about in more detail if you want in the Q&A. On the other hand, statements that I've seen on the other side, reducing carbon dioxide would destroy the climate of the United States, and a very wordy bullet that actually got via email that demonstrates scientific literacy and integral literacy simultaneously. So how do I deal with those two extremes? One way I deal with it is to say that the credible people on both sides are actually not that far apart, and climate models and observations are not that far apart. And so the whole divergence of opinion has been artificially amplified. This, for example, is a trend in Texas temperatures in orange, 9-year running averages, along with several global surface temperature trends, as well as, in one of them, the light blue, climate model trends. And they all line up fairly well. There's not a lot of disagreement there, especially between climate models and historical. And then if you look at projections, the IPCC has projections of a certain amount of increase based on climate models. Then popular climate skeptic, Judy Curry, who probably wouldn't necessarily call herself a skeptic, along with Nick Lewis, they came out with an alternative projection, which is lower, but is still within the same range of the IPCC. So even the experts on the skeptic side agree that climate is warming, is going to continue to warm. The only argument is how much. Is it going to be 1 degree or 3 degrees? But within that range, we have common ground, and we can deal with the fact that climate is warming, and we need to deal with it. This is another plot that I put up there to show that climate models tend to agree with the historical temperature in Texas. Blue is simulation, green is actual trend, and then looking forward, the climate model simulation is not that far away from the historical trend recently. So even if you didn't know what was causing climate change so far, it would actually be reasonable to use something pretty close to what the models are projecting anyway. So to summarize, your audience knows an awful lot of stuff already, and you're not going to change their minds about any of it probably. But you need to build trust that you are speaking in terms of advancing their interests while at the same time advancing your own mission. Show evidence of what's happened. Demonstrate that you are treating everybody with respect and are not advocating for the destruction of the United States, either by taking action against climate change or by not taking action against climate change. And the way you can do that is focusing on what matters locally in terms of what's happening in your community, how much of that might be climate change. Guaranteed it's not all climate change, and natural variability may be masking climate change. I think Houston, for example, they had Hurricane Harvey. They're well prepared for future floods because they saw something really extreme. North Texas hasn't had something that extreme recently. So the actual climate change trend may be larger than what's been experienced so far in terms of extreme rainfall. And that's a tricky thing to deal with. A good resource for slides is the IPCC reports. They've got lots of figures that sort of synthesize information. National Climate Assessment, which you can still find in places, has been archived, even though the government entity that produces National Climate Assessment has effectively been shut down over the past few months. And I can help you out with information, slides, data, whatever you might need. So thank you for your attention, and I'll be happy to answer questions once we get to that point.
Thank you for that presentation. It was really informative. Great to hear. We're now going to move into our next presentation. So I'd like to introduce Sarah Coles. Sarah Coles is the Executive Director of the Texas Children in Nature Network. Sarah has been working within the informal education and nature field for the last 18 years. Sarah's career has taken her from being in the classroom to moving to informal education and working at various institutions across the country. While working at an institution focusing on ecohistory, which is the study of how humans have adapted and influenced their environment, she found her passion for seeing students, children, and families spend time in nature. She has worked in Texas in both the museum and nature center environments, starting her work with TCINN as a regional leader in the Coastal Bend area, and has been the executive director of the organization since 2019. So Sarah, if you just let me know when to advance your slides, we can begin your presentation.
Okay, so thank you everyone for allowing me to speak today. I'm excited to talk a bit about what Nature Smart libraries are and how we are working with them in communities all across Texas to really think about how we're increasing our green space. So if you want to go to the next slide. So Texas Children in Nature Network started at a Senate Bill 205 in 2009, which introduced to address the problem of nature deficit disorder. So the idea that kids weren't spending enough time in nature. And so a group of legislators out of that signed a letter to 4 state agencies: Texas Parks and Wildlife, Department of State Health Services, Texas Education Association, and the Agriculture Department, requesting that they form a group to talk about how to get kids outside. And then the very first meeting of Texas Children in Nature Network was hosted by Texas Parks and Wildlife in 2010. And we were part of Texas Parks and Wildlife for 10 years as an incubation program. And then on January 1st, 2021, we officially became an independent nonprofit. And with that, we're really addressing a few big issues across the state of Texas. We have quite a few challenges here. One being we have a whole lot of kids. There are about 10% of the total US population that are school age all live here in Texas. We also have only about 5% public land, so 5% of our land here is publicly available, which means we're thinking about how can we get a whole lot of kids in a little bit of land. And so we're looking at some really interesting partnerships, and that's where our library partnership comes into play. Next slide. So why do we do this? We know that kids who regularly spend time outdoors are healthier mentally and physically. We see some really great physical and mental health benefits. Right now we have a mental health crisis with our students, and so we're really focused on how can we be improving the mental health of our young people here in Texas. We also see better test scores from kids who are spending time outdoors. And then everything from self-esteem to self-discipline, self-regulation, problem-solving skills, all those things are related to regularly spending time outside. And then also we know that kids who regularly spend time outside as children become tomorrow's conservation leaders. So they are the ones who are going to be working to conserve and preserve these natural environments as they get older. Next slide. So at Texas Children in Nature Network, we work off of two big models. The first one is collective impact. So this is the idea that we are an organization working with over 1,000 other organizations all across the state for how we are working to get children and families outside. I'm often telling our partners that part of Texas Children in Nature's job is to help their group fulfill their mission towards how it gets children and families outside. So every group that looks a little bit different. If I'm working with the Forest Service, we're talking about things like Project Learning Tree and the state forests. If I'm talking to a city, might be talking about policy that's in place about things like transportation, their parks and rec departments, their public health departments. So everyone's working a little bit differently. We have mutually reinforcing activities like our conferences and our regional meetings. And in that, we're all sharing resources as well. We are a group that puts a high emphasis on cooperation and working together, because we know that getting all these kids outside is not something that only one group can do. It needs all of us. We have lots of communication going back and forth amongst all of our partners. It's a big part of collective impact. And then all of that needs kind of a strong backbone organization, a rudder for the ship steering the way that we go. And that's where Texas Children in Nature comes in. Next slide. We also work in systems change. So we're working at kind of the 15,000 foot level, thinking about what are all the systems in place that affect how children and families are able to spend time outside. What are the policies and laws? What are the practices? How do resources come into play? Both money, but also time and information are great resources to think about as well. What are the relationships that are affecting all of this work? Who are the decision makers? And then all of that is affecting how children and families spend time outside. Next up. So you may be thinking, what does this have to do with libraries? So when we're thinking about our systems change model and libraries, we're thinking about, libraries have land. There's often some space around the libraries, so we're thinking about that. We're also thinking about how libraries are community hubs. A lot of times, libraries are a trusted partner by community members. And so how can we work within that place? So policies that we're thinking about with our libraries are where they're located, what are their lending policies. We're talking about their summer programming, talking about grants and the librarian's time, just talking about the relationship the librarians have with their community members. A lot of times librarians have really good relationships with those who are in their community that they're serving. And so all of that comes together to help us get more kids outside through libraries. Next up. So what is a Nature Smart Library? So a Nature Smart Library is a library that uses its venue as a place to connect children and families to the outdoors. So that can take a form in a variety of ways, and I'll look at some of the great ways that we do that across the state. But people who can get involved are library employees, boards of directors of the Friends Group for the libraries, library patrons, volunteers for the library. All of those folks can get involved. And some benefits to Nature Smart Libraries are especially it helps us reach low-income families who may not have resources available in other places, helps maximize library facilities, and increases, again, that regular outdoor time that families are able to get. Okay, next. We also are leveraging our partnerships within our Nature Smart Libraries. So not just how we're working with the librarians themselves, but how the rest of our 1,000 partners are working with the libraries as well, doing lots of collaboration and fostering partnerships between our nature partners and our libraries. For instance, how are the state parks partnering with the libraries and so on. Next. So our Nature Smart Libraries kind of fall in 4 main categories. The first are story walks, nature programming, green space improvements, and then a program called LEAP. And I'll go into a little bit more detail with all of these, but here you'll see a picture of the just opened Austin Downtown Public Library System and how they were able to utilize some area that had been kind of forgotten about between them and the river, and really put in some great green space that's available for patrons to use, to read. What you can't see, well, you can kind of see underneath where it says Nature Smart Libraries, there's a rooftop garden up there as well. So it's not always outdoor space on the ground, but also thinking about what's up in the air as well. Next. So you may think, we're not the Austin Public Library. I don't have that kind of space. We are just a small little library. Well, you could put a nature nook into your library space through some green infrastructure within the library, bring in some nature-themed books, bring in some conservation books, maybe have nature-themed story hour, have your local master naturalists, or if you have a nature park near you, have their staff come in and do some programming there as well. Next. You could put in a seed library. So this is something that's becoming more and more common around libraries, is a place for folks to trade seeds for their own gardens. And so they can come in and leave seeds if they've got a bunch, or take some seeds and be able to really improve their outdoor space at their homes. It's also a great place to provide resources if you're looking to improve things like xeriscaping or energy efficiency through having more green space around folks' homes. You can really work on promoting that through the seed libraries as well. Also, as you see, a lot of our libraries are reusing their old card catalogs to have these seed libraries as well. Next. So a story walk. So these are really fun. I know all of y'all are up in North Central Texas. One of my favorite walks is at the Fort Worth Botanic Garden. So if you find yourselves over there, you can check one of these out in person. But story walks are a way to get families both outdoors, reading, and active. So what you'll see here is we take a page from a book, put it on a sign, sometimes put an action on that sign as well, and folks can read, and then they will walk to the next sign. And so it's able to get folks active while reading at the same time. And these can be anywhere from a relatively inexpensive model like you see here, where it's almost like a yard sign that the signs have been put on, to something more substantial and permanent as well. Next. Next, we have our Library Explorer Adventure Packs, or LEAP. So these are backpacks that are that libraries can check out. They've got all kinds of nature gear. You'll see here, this is version 1.0 that you see here. We've had some updates since this picture was taken, but you can kind of see the reason I like it is because it is clear, even though the backpacks now aren't. This met its first mesquite tree and didn't go very far from there. But what you can see in the clear backpack is it's full of nature gear. It's got all kinds of stuff that kids and families can check out. They're themed. So we have all different backpack themes available, from birding to herping to rocks and fossils to the night sky. So it has all kinds of great activities available within the backpack. Families can check it out for 2 to 3 weeks, depending on what the library system itself does. And then also a lot of our partners, going back to that collective impact model, a lot of our partners are offering free admission with those backpacks to their sites as well. So right now we have 38 participating libraries in the backpacks. Up by you, Dallas Public Library System has 8 libraries that have our backpacks. So you should definitely check those out if you are able to. Next. So all of that's kind of how we are supporting our Nature Smart libraries. One of the other ways that we're supporting our libraries is through professional development. So we offer for all of our partners over 35 professional developments throughout the year. These are some of the ones that we have coming up. And then we also, next slide, have our conference that we do every year. So this year we'll be in Bryan College Station, but we offer at that conference things like how to build a story walk, how libraries are putting this programming into place. So all of our library partners are able to learn from each other throughout that process as well. Next. If you're wondering how you can get involved, you can join our North Texas Regional Collaborative, attend a summit or a webinar, or become a member. And then next, you can follow us on social media if you're interested. Those are our social media handles. And then next up, I think it's just my contact info. So I'm happy to answer questions when we get there, but thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Sounds like a really great program. I am now going to introduce our final speaker, Dr. Stephanie Clintonia Boddie. So Dr. Stephanie Boddie is an associate professor of church and community ministries at Baylor University, and she is affiliated with the Diana R. Garland School of Social Work, George W. Truett Seminary, the School of Education, and the Environmental Humanities program. She also has affiliations with the University of Pennsylvania, Washington University in St. Louis, and the University of Michigan. This academic year, she served as a distinguished visiting research scholar at University of Pennsylvania. She created and teaches the course Education from a Gardener's Perspective. She has co-authored 5 books and over 60 journal articles, book chapters, and reports. She's a graduate of Johns Hopkins University and University of Pennsylvania, and she has served on the leadership team of the Sustainable Community and Regenerative Agriculture, or S.C.R.A.P project, since its inception in 2022. Stephanie, if you want to go ahead and take control, and you can begin your presentation.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm trying to take control. I'm not seeing the button now.
If it's easier, I can just advance your slides.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. Well, I'm happy to be here today representing my colleagues from Waco's S.C.R.A.P Collective. Next slide. And to begin, I want to acknowledge the institutions that believed in the promise of local resilience, the Funders Network, and the Cooper Foundation. Their support has enabled the Sustainable Community and Resilience Agriculture Project, what we call S.C.R.A.P, to emerge not as a one-off initiative, but as an enduring model, now beginning our 4th year. This funding helped lay a foundation for building resilience from the ground up. And this year we also received funding from the Environmental Protection Agency from January 1st through April 30th. Next slide. Our foundation for the S.C.R.A.P Collective is built through deep collaboration. We have several partners, as you can see here. Our lead partner is Mission Waco's Urban REAP with Emily Hills, the City of Waco Sustainability and Resiliency Office with Eric Kaufman. We have several professors and staff that have been involved at Baylor University. Global Revive with Kay Bell, the World Hunger Relief Institute. We've had several partners. Our founding member, Clintonia, is no longer with us, as well as Westmoreland. We also have a church that's part of the network, the Family of Faith Worship Center, with Pastor Ruben Andrade and Pastor Tony Garcia. We have one local business, the S.C.R.A.P Farmers Market Health and Wellness, Inc., with Dr. Nickerson. And in the last couple of months, we've added Texas A&M AgriLife, their extension program with April Strickland. Next. And so, as you can see, S.C.R.A.P is a multi-sector, multi-neighborhood collective grounded in place-based action. Our partners span several sectors, as you've just heard, and S.C.R.A.P's footprint is intentionally distributed across the city of Waco, including the most historically underserved neighborhoods. And this map shows our growing network of compost sites, gardens, food distribution sites, and our educational sites. These sites are strategic, and locations were selected based on proximity to food deserts, vacant lots, youth-serving institutions, schools, and congregations with land, and other organizations with limited technical capacity. And each organization that you see here was already engaged in some way addressing food insecurity or food waste. And what this means in terms of these locations, in terms of building resilience from the ground up, we started where people live, work, pray, and play. Next. So what do each of these partners do? Collective resilience is only possible when roles are clear and complementary. So each of our partners contribute to the city, community, city campus, and community ecosystem. The City of Waco supports funding and identifying new partners and aligning with the public sustainability goals. Mission Waco has a compost certification program and compost club for a small fee. They also lead sustainability education, highlighting their aquaponics system, their plant nursery and composting program. Global Revive works with youth and seniors to build gardens on neglected lots and reclaim this underutilized land to create vibrant public spaces with murals, gardens, and compost sites. Family of Faith, they joined the group and they were already feeding over 1,600 individuals each week through their mini market, and has expanded their work to include mobile food distribution in 10 congregations, a garden, compost site. They also have bilingual nutrition classes, as well as a new pharmacy prescription program. And during extreme weather events, they have the capacity to take in maybe 1 or 2 families. Baylor University has 2 gardens and compost sites, and there we provide educational opportunities for students through service learning classes, as well as the community. And we also contribute to the research and capacity building and provide interns to a few of the partners. The Shack, this local business provides opportunities for members of the community to purchase plants, as well as educational information on composting, growing food, as well as health and mental health resources. And then lastly, World Hunger Relief. This project is based on is located on a 40-acre farm. And in addition to growing food, they have training programs. They have programs for youth, such as summer camps, and they have produce distribution. Several of our partners are active in our farmers market. And as you can see, this distribution of labor is rooted in the principle of ecological interdependence, where each partner strengthens the food system by doing what they do best. Next slide. So let's contextualize this work. Why SCRAP? As you can see, food insecurity affects 19.7 of Waco's residents, meaning that 1 in 5 people do not have reliable access to nutritious food. And this is higher than Central Texas and the national rate of 11.4. Waco's poverty rate is also high, 24.8, nearly twice the rate of Central Texas and the national rate. Many of our focus neighborhoods are considered USDA, next slide, USDA low access, low income census tracts, with 14.4 households receiving SNAP. And these statistics don't just point to individual hardship, they expose structural vulnerabilities that inhibit resilience. The dual crisis of scarcity we see in food insecurity and overabundance we see in food waste highlights the need for a model like SCRAP. So we also have environmental constraints. Only 0.3% of McLennan County land is active farmland, and waste management systems divert about 25% to food to landfills. In addition, food-related healthcare costs surpass 53 million annually in McLennan County, where Waco is located. So in addition to being at risk for food-driven health threats, urban neighborhoods face extreme heat, low tree canopy, illegal dumping, and aging infrastructure. And these elevated risks are also some of the challenges that we seek to address in Waco. Next slide. So our public-private partnership has been informed by several strategies. First, asset mapping. We catalog what each neighborhood already had in terms of land, relationships, knowledge, and designed our work around the strengths. We also, in order to do this, we had several community outreach meetings, community charrettes, and we also adopted a peer-to-peer assessment model where each of the sites had a team of members from other sites to go and learn about their sites and assess how their baseline, and then later on assess how they were making progress. So this was some of the data that we used so that we would have a data-driven decision-making process as we developed our sustainability planning. We also used EPA's warm waste reduction model, and this was primarily so that we could estimate the reduction of methane emission in our project. Next slide. So why a collective? We had considered when we started this project how we wanted to develop our work. And our first grant, our charge was to make sure that this project centered power sharing and resource sharing. So we started out our work intentionally sharing leadership, vision, resources, and goals. And we really highlighted the mutuality of responsibility for the work to address food waste and food insecurity. And by using the term collective rather than perhaps a term like coalition, we wanted to signal a deep responsibility and accountability in our work that embodies solidarity, co-creation, and relationship building. So as I mentioned, one of our primary goals was to share power and to build community and trust. And this was very important because complex problems like environmental stress, food insecurity, and food waste demand integrated responses where organizations are in this work for the long haul. Next slide. So how did we develop S.C.R.A.P? Next slide. This was a multi-stage process. So in stage one, our planning and organizing stage, we came together to engage local organizations, to understand local knowledge, assess readiness, and to build trust. And this was the spring of 2022. The summer of 2022 to the fall of 2022 was our second stage where we were able to get funding and begin to visualize our project and look at the ways that we would come together with our gardening projects, compost hubs, and curriculum development. By the winter of 2023 to the fall of 2024, we were able to fund and strategize and more fully implement this work and develop an evaluation process to deepen that allowed us to deepen our partnership roles and train others that would be working with us. In our next phase, we were able to expand our work and our evaluation process. And then most recently, we're currently in our fifth phase, where we are reorganizing and reassessing where we want to go in this next phase as we seek additional funding and consider feedback for strengthening our organizational and agricultural processes. Next slide. So as you've heard, we have several organizations in the S.C.R.A.P Collective, and these organizations have a diverse set of offerings. And in order to better understand each critical component, we created this grid. So you can see that different organizations are providing different things, but we cover a wide range of activities, everything from gardening and gardening education, composting education, cooking and nutrition education, school-based gardening curriculum, after school, summer camps. We also have projects that integrate health and mental health, as well as cultural celebrations and interdisciplinary engaged learning. Most recently, we've integrated the mobile food programs, and in order to reach those in the community, we have a volunteer program, as well as various organizations share this work out through their newsletters and social media. Next slide. So our impact over the years that we have been in our implementation phase from April 2023 to May 2025, we have seen impact in our social impact engaging over 15,000 community residents. We've enlisted over 17,000 volunteers. We've also certified 28 community composters that are affiliated with a range of institutions. We've hosted over 340 educational events. This includes bilingual events, as well as educational events related to health and wellness, mental health. We've also had a series of Earth Day events. We've also, in addition to the work that Family of Faith has done, feeding their 1,600 people a week through their expansion of mobile markets, we have an additional 28,879 community residents that are being fed at various sites across the city. In terms of our environmental impact, we've diverted over 300,000 pounds of food waste, over 79,000 pounds of compost has been produced, and over 90,000 pounds of produce have been harvested. We've been able to initiate several new programs during our implementation phase. Several of these programs are at Baylor University. We've revived our community gardens and started a summer ethics institute for faculty. We have a new environmental humanities minor with engaged learning projects, as well as a Growing Leaders and Learners Educators Institute. The Family of Faith, they, as I mentioned, started a veggie prescription project called Pharmacy, and we're hoping that they can expand their resilience hub. We also have a fee-for-service composting program, where World Hunger Relief reaches out to businesses in the community, and the senior VIP gardens, started by Global Revive, starts backyard gardens for our elders in our communities. We've had a few different types of nutrition and healthy eating classes, one focused on the African American community and another focused on our Latin community. We've been expanding our work to reach more businesses. We're very interested as we get additional funding to move forward with a green job pipeline and our food system exhibit to be co-created with the community. Next slide. So in doing this work, we faced several challenges. Infrastructure constraints was one challenge that we faced in terms of where we might be able to place new gardens and new composting sites. We also had access barriers for some communities because of the limited public transportation that we have in Waco. And then there was also time-sensitive community building. In order to do this type of work, it really takes the investment in community building and meeting with residents. And we had hoped to have more time to do this work at the beginning phase. And it was the benefit of having these multiple organizations where they were able to reach those in their communities. And we had a few community events where we came together to reach other community members. So the lessons that we learned in this process, one was pacing. Basically, we learned, as Stephen Covey would say, to move at the speed of trust. that to start slow, we would go far. And so we really tried to emphasize the process over outcomes in this work. And that proved to be one of the successes of our work, is that we built good relationships across our partners and strengthened those relationships beyond our 6 core partners. We also learned that local leadership matters. So we wanted to make sure that we had leaders that people recognize from their communities so that they could see themselves in this work, and that would help us to move forward and have more momentum in this work. Power sharing, as I said before, was also vital in this work. And so we had an intentional practice of distributing decision-making authority, leadership roles, and access to resources. And so often when a particular organization may not have resources, particularly volunteers or interns, other organizations stepped in and helped those groups get their work off the ground. Complementary partners was also an important lesson that we learned. So we tried to ensure from the beginning that we assessed who was at the table. In the first iteration of the project, what we realized was that we had Baylor and the city as strong anchoring institutions. We had Global Revive from East Waco, a predominantly African American community. And we also had the World Hunger Relief Institute as part of our work. But we realized that we needed other sectors like the business sector. We needed other disciplines. We also needed the Latin community at the table. So we slowed down our process to make sure that we could add other partners. And then marketing. In this process, we also recognized that a campaign to raise awareness about the work as an early part of the process is very helpful. When we were able to get our implementation grant, we brought on a communication firm, and they helped us to develop a brand with a logo that you see here. They helped us with bilingual messaging, with a billboard, postcards, flyers, getting our work in various outlets like podcasts, radio broadcasting. And this was very helpful. And we recognized as we did this work that it could have also been helpful to have some of these things in that early stage of community building. Next slide. So as we think about this project, S.C.R.A.P Collective, and what we've been able to do to sustain and build this work, we recognized that we needed both grassroots ownership and cross-sector alignment. One without the other was not enough. We started by listening to people. We identified organizations that had the kind of mission and vision to address food waste and food insecurity, and that also had land. We co-designed responses, and we started small. This helped us to learn fast and to scale smart. And we have kept going from season to season. S.C.R.A.P is a practice of what environmental justice looks like when it's deeply rooted, locally led, and collectively nurtured. Thank you, and I welcome your questions. Next
Thank
slide.
you, Stephanie.
Next slide. So here you can find my contact information.
Thank you so much. That was really great information, and that leads us right into the Q&A session. So, if you are interested in asking a question, you could either ask your question verbally, you can raise your hand, or use the raise hand button, and I can call on you to unmute and ask your question, or you can type your questions into the chat box, and I can read them. I do have okay, oh, we've got a question. It's a long one. Okay, so, Dr. Nielsen-Gammon, on your slide showing survey responses to various climate change related questions, if I read it correctly, those responses were from a circa 2015 survey. If we look at more current surveys from Yale Climate Communications for 2024, it appears that the opinion responses have evolved over time. Would it be helpful to show the 2015 one and then the 2024 to help people understand that views have changed as the populace learns more?
Well, I think it's not necessarily a monotonic shift. Yes, it's useful to show the most up-to-date data, but as political opinions change, then opinions about climate change also. It is true, though, that it's worth noting that we have implemented uh, lots of measures to reduce climate change emissions, both nationally and globally, and that has had an effect and has eliminated the most extreme possibilities for climate change. And the fact that this has happened without major disruption to economies means that some progress is possible. And I like to point out to people that it's sort of exponential in terms of the benefits of the crew. The cost or impact of, say, going from 3 to 4 degrees of warming is much, much greater than the cost of going from 1 to 2 degrees of warming. So a small amount um, of mitigation action can have a large benefit, even though action is typically framed in terms of meeting targets like 1.5 degrees of warming or 2 degrees of warming or something like that. And that provides a bit more optimism that at least the low-hanging fruit types of changes are worth making.
Larry, I see you have your hand raised. You have a follow-up.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. I wanted to thank you again, Dr. Nielsen-Gammon, for all the great work you're doing. I did have the opportunity at an event yesterday to speak with State Legislator Chairman Todd Hunter, and he mentioned, we were talking a little bit about the rain bombs that was the tragedies in the Central Texas, and he said one of the things he's trying to do is help more people become aware of those future trends in extreme weather reports that you've done, and trying to help promote awareness that way. And so I thank you for that, and I thank you for doing those with your work with Texas 2036. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. By the way, I was invited to speak next Thursday at the hearing on disaster preparedness in Kerrville. So I'll be talking about things to deal with extreme weather on a short time scale as well.
Awesome. I have a question too. So kind of from all of your perspectives, if an organization is interested with engaging with their community, on climate sustainability, but there's just a really strong history, I guess, of distrust within that community. Just kind of through your experience with engagement with the public, what would be like your number one piece of advice for kind of starting that conversation with a community where there is that level of distrust and getting them engaged?
I guess I could go first. I would say for us, it's really meeting them where they are, both physically, emotionally, spiritually. Go to them, but also be really honoring of where they are coming from and listening before we're coming in with a lot of information for them.
And I would say I totally agree with that. The work that we did, we tried to start with where people were, and we recognize that starting with environmental resilience or climate resilience might be a hard lift, but food insecurity, people understand food insecurity, and it was a lot easier to connect what was happening in our community, their experiences in 2021 when people could not get food in their community because of the ice storm, or people understanding that their food is traveling such long distances, but we have this vacant land in our community. Could we be growing more community-based food, given that 0.3% of the land in Texas is being used to grow produce? What could we do in our own communities to address food insecurity as a part of a larger sustainability effort, and then begin the conversations about other things like food waste and climate resilience?
Yeah, I'll also add that generally speaking, people are bothered, let's say, about the controversies of climate change in a very broad sense. And the more you can take it down to specific local actions, which you can argue are, beneficial, no matter what one's opinion is of controlling carbon dioxide, you can bypass some of that resistance and get to the discussion that you really need to have.
Awesome. Thank you for those responses. Are there any other questions before we wrap up? Okay, hearing none, we will move forward. I just have some events and resources I want to share with everyone. So NCTCOG will be hosting its quarterly meeting of the Regional Integration Sustainability Efforts, or RISE Coalition, on July 30th. That's tomorrow. This is a great opportunity to connect with local governments and other groups, focus on sustainable practices within the region. So if you are interested in attending that meeting, that RSVP form is there on the slide, and you can receive the meeting information that way, or you can also visit the committee page to stay up to date with meetings and get some more information on the group. NCTCOG's Regional Energy Management Team is hosting a webinar on building management systems on not July 19th, on August 19th. So if this is a topic that you're interested in learning more about, I would encourage you to register at that link on the screen. We also have many ways that you can stay informed about upcoming events and workshops, so please visit our web pages. You can also join our email list. We send out lots of good information that way, so you can stay in the know on these topics. And then I've also got some funding resources to share. So NCTCOG has a few sites related to energy management. So our Conserve North Texas website houses resources on fuel, energy, and water topics. It also contains past workshops, podcasts, reports, and more to support responsible resource conservation practices. That's where this webinar's recording and presentation slides will be posted. We also have our Go Solar Texas website as well. That's more solar targeted resources. We've also got some resources available through SECO. So SECO offers technical assistance, including PEAs, which I'll discuss in a moment, and energy management policy development. SECO also provides support for state mandated local government energy reporting. And additionally, Watt Watchers of Texas is a program SECO provides for use in schools and at home and is designed to promote behavior change for better energy management. So PEAs, these are provided at no cost to help support energy management policy development and provide facility benchmarking. And this information can then be used to create energy efficient guidelines. SECO also contracts with engineering firms to provide technical assistance to energy or water related matters, and the link to sign up for that is not on the slide, but I can include that in the follow-up email. And then lastly, the Lone Star program is currently having open enrollment through August 31st. This is a revolving loan program that provides low interest rate loans to assist Texas public institutions by financing their energy related cost reduction retrofit projects. So as a reminder, I'll be emailing the link to the slides from today's presentations to all those who submitted an RSVP, and then I will also be sharing the recording. Again, my email's in the chat if you want to reach out to receive that email, but again, that info will also be posted on the Conserve Our Texas website. If you could, please complete the webinar evaluation form. Which is linked on the screen. I will also drop that in the chat. And also as a reminder, if your time is not paid for through federal dollars, please consider donating the value of your time through an in-kind match by completing the in-kind form. And so I will close out today by sharing our partner's contact information. Adam Mueller is a program specialist with SECO, and then Sean Auckland, who's a senior manager with the South Central Partnership for Energy Efficiency as a Resource, are both available to provide support and assist with any questions you may have. And then finally, I'll share with you our contact information here at the COG. Thank you again to everyone who joined us today. And many thanks again to our speakers, John Nielsen-Gammon, Sarah Coles, and Stephanie Clintonia Boddie for taking the time to share their knowledge with us today. So thank you for attending. This webinar is now over. Have a great day, everyone.